We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 11a. The Mishnah says, Mazgulo es hakos. Let's say they pour for him a cup of wine. V'yamar hareini Nazir mimenu. And he says, I'm a Nazir from it, meaning from this cup. Hareza Nazir. So then he's considered to be a full-fledged Nazir. Ma'isa b'isha achas. There was an incident with a particular woman. Sha'isa shikora. She was drunk. Umazgula esakos, they poured for her a cup of wine. V'yamra hareini nazira mimenu, and she said, I'm a nazira from it, from that cup. Amru chachamim, and the chachamim said, Lo niskav nazu, ela lomar harehu alai carbon. She only had intention to say that this particular cup is to me like a carbon, meaning she's only prohibiting this particular cup of wine. She is not considered to be a full-fledged nazira. And the Gemara says, Ma'isa listor. It seems like the incident that you're bringing in the Mishnah is contradicting what you said at the beginning of the Mishnah. Amrit Reisha Harez a Nazir. First you say in the Reisha that the person is a Nazir, even though he says Hareini Nazir mimenu from it, just from this cup, he's considered a full-fledged Nazir. V'adr tani Ma'isa b'isha achas. Then you bring the story with that one woman. Alma b'haihu de aser hayena acharina shari. And you see from there that in this cup she's aser, but in other wine it would be permitted. And the Gemara answers, Chisure michsur of hachi katani. There are words missing in the Mishnah, and it should read as follows. Mazgu lo esakos. They pour him a cup. V'yamar hareini nazir mimenu. And he says, I'm a nazir from it, from that cup. Hareza nazir, then he's considered a nazir. V'yim shikorhu, but let's say he's drunk. V'yamar hareini nazir mimenu, and he says, I'm a nazir from it, from this cup. In that case, eino nazir. In that case, he's not a full-fledged nazir. My time, and what's the reason? Command to Amar Harei Alai Carbon. We consider it as if he said, this cup is to me like a carbon, and he's only prohibited in that cup. Now, if you're going to say, why doesn't he just say that? If he only wanted to prohibit this particular cup, he should have said Harei Alai Carbon. Why is he saying Hareini Nazir Mimenu? And the answer to that, the Gemara says, is Savar, because he thinks to himself, Maisin li acharina umitzaranli. They're going to bring me another cup, and that's going to cause me pain. I don't want to have any more. I want to prevent them from offering me more. So Emalu Hamilsa, so therefore I'm going to say this kind of statement, the Psikalahu, it sounds set for them, I don't want anything else. And there's an incident like that also with one woman. In other words, the point is he says that I'm a Nazir Mimenu from it. That's a way of him telling them he doesn't want any more cups. But in reality, all he's really doing is creating a prohibition from this particular cup. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hareini Nazir al Menashe Sheheshosa Yayin Umetame Lamesim. Let's say a person says, I'm a Nazir on the condition that I can drink wine and that I can become Tamei Meis. In other words, I only want to be a Nazir in regards to growing out my hair. Hareza Nazir v'Asr Bekul. And he's considered a full Nazir, and he's prohibited in all things that a Nazir is prohibited in. Yodeya ani sheyesh nazirus. Let's say the person says, I know about the concept of nazirus. Avaleni yodeya shehanazir aser b'yayin. But I didn't know that a nazir is forbidden in wine. Hareza aser. Again, the Mishnah says the person is aser in everything. Rabbi Shimon matter, but Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter. He's not a nazir in such a case. Yodeya ani shehanazir aser b'yayin. I know that a nazir is aser in wine. Avol savar hayisi shechachamim matirinli. But I thought that the chachamim would say for me the wine would be mutter. Because I can't live without wine. Or because I bury the dead, meaning to say the chacham would allow me to become tamei meis. So in that case, hareza mutter, he is mutter, he's not considered a nazir. Rabbi Shimon oser, and Rabbi Shimon says it's aser, he is considered to be a nazir. And Rashi explains, if he says, I know there's such a thing as a nazir, but I didn't know that a nazir is aser in wine. And he says, I'm a nazir. And he's aser in everything. And Rashi explains, this follows the sheet of the Rabbanan. The Tanakama, they follow the Rabbanan that say, even if a person only becomes a nazir from one of the items of the nazirus, the person becomes a full-fledged nazir. That is the explanation over here at the beginning of the Mishnah, where it says again, he says, I know about nazirus, but I don't know nazir asr b'yayin hareza asr. The Tanakama is the Rabbanan. Even if he's nazir only from part of it, he's a full nazir. And Rabbi Shimon in the opposite, Rabbi Shimon matir, the whole shalokiv olav elachatzi on nazirus. Rabbi Shimon says if a person only accepted upon himself a partial nazirus, shalohaya yodeya shan nazir aser b'yayin, he didn't know about the prohibition of wine. Hareza mutter b'kul, and he's totally mutter. For Rabbi Shimon l'taime, Rabbi Shimon follows his reasoning. To Amar eno aser at sheyazer mikulan, he says that there is no prohibition unless he takes a nazirus from everything. And then at the end of the Mishnah, it seemed to have it in reverse. It said over there, Rabbi Shimon oser, in the case where the person says, I thought the chachamim would would allow me to have wine. I thought the Chachamim would allow me to be Tamei Meis. So Rabbi Shimon is the one that said it's prohibited. V'taim ha'mefarish b'Gemara. The reason for Rabbi Shimon will be explained in the Gemara, because that seems to be the opposite of the general sheet of Rabbi Shimon. The general sheet of Rabbi Shimon seems to be that if you take Nazirus from only part of it, it's going to be mutter and not asr. And the Gemara says, "V'liflog nami Rabbi Shimon bereisha." Why doesn't Rabbi Shimon also argue in the very first case of the Mishnah? In the first case of the Mishnah also, the case was, I am a Nazir on the condition that I can drink wine or become Tamei Meis. And it said, Hareza Nazir v'asr b'kulin. He's a Nazir, and he's totally prohibited. And Rabbi Shimon didn't argue. Rabbi Shimon should have said there also, it's mutter, because since he only took upon himself a partial Nazirus, therefore it should not be a Nazirus at all. So that's why the Gemara is asking, V'liflog nami Rabbi Shimon bereisha. Why doesn't Rabbi Shimon argue also in the first case of the Mishnah? Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Chalak haya Rabbi Shimon af v'reisha. Rabbi Shimon actually does argue even in the Reisha. When it says Rabbi Shimon matir, it's going on the first case of the Mishnah as well. Ravina says, Bereisha lo palig Rabbi Shimon. In the Reisha, no, Rabbi Shimon would not argue, meaning to say that in the case of the Reisha, where the person says, Al minas, shehe shose yayin u'metami lamesim, Rabbi Shimon would agree that the person is a full-fledged Nazir. What's the reason? My time, or what's the reason? Mishum dahavale masna al mashakasa b'Torah, because there, he's saying Al minas. When he's saying Al Manas, he's making a condition, and it's considered like he's adding a condition against what the Torah itself says. To no batal. If someone tries to make a Tanai against something that's written in the Torah, so the Tanai, the condition is actually nullified. So it's as if he's saying, Hareini Nazir, I'm a Nazir. That makes him a full-fledged Nazir. Then he makes a condition, Al Manas, that I can drink wine or be Matami Lamesim. That's a condition against the Torah. The Tanai, the condition doesn't count, but the original statement does count, and therefore Rabbi Shimon would say that the person is a Nazir. Now the Gemara continues with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, he will respond to Ravina and say this is not considered a Tanai. Amar loch, he will say to you, Hi al manas kechutz dami. When the person says al manas over here, that's really the equivalent of chutz. It's like saying I'm a Nazir with the exception of the following. It's not a condition, and therefore in such a situation, Rabbi Shimon would disagree in that case as well. Rabbi Shimon would say that it's mutter, that he's mutter in that case because he's only taken a Nazir from part of it. He said chutz. He's made some exceptions, and therefore that is not a Nazirus at all, according to Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara says, Tanya Kavase de Ravina. We have a brisa that supports the idea of Ravina, that in the Reish of the Mishnah, the real reason is because of Masna al Mashakasav V'Torah, Amar Hareini Nazir al Manasha Heishose Yayin, Umetame L'Mesim. If a person says, I'm a Nazir on the condition that I can drink wine or become Tamei Meis, Harezin Nazir V'Asr B'Kulan. He's a Nazir, he's totally forbidden in everything that a Nazir is forbidden in, Mipneshu Masna al Mashakasav V'Torah, because he's made a condition against what is written in the Torah, V'Chala Masna al Mashakasav V'Torah, to no batal. Anybody who makes a Tanai against what is written in the Torah, the Tanai, the condition, is considered nullified. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Yodeya Anisha Nazir Asr B'Yayin. So the case over there was, person says, I know that a Nazir can't have wine, but I thought that the Chachamim would allow it for me. And so in that case, it seemed to be the reverse. There, Rabbi Shimon was the one that said that he is prohibited. And so that's what the Gemara says. V'lamrin Reisha Asr Rabbi Shimon Matir. In the beginning of the Mishnah, it's the Tanakama that says Asr and Rabbi Shimon that says Mutter. Why here is it reversed? And the Gemara says, Eimonami Hareza Asr Rabbi Shimon Matir. First answer the Gemara gives is that's what you should say here. Just switch it around in the Mishnah. It should have said at the end of the Mishnah that it's Asr according to the Tanakama, and it's Mutter according to Rabbi Shimon, and that keeps Rabbi Shimon consistent. And the Gemara continues, V'iboy Yisem, if you want, I could say another answer. Liolam lo sepach, really, you don't need to reverse anything. Hasam over there, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis.